And now let's introduce you to Vernon Sankey. He's written this amazing book called The Way, Finding Peace in Turbulent Times. And he's not done it recently. He's not done it because of the turbulent times. He kind of knew this was coming. And he's given us a wonderful video that will just illustrate where the book has come from. And then he's going to share with us more about that. So I'm just going to, how do I do it? Hang on, come out of that. Let me use my glasses. Sorry, I'm just playing around here. Now I've got to share my sound so that you can hear it as well. I'll pop that there. Here we go.
We're living in frightening and turbulent times.
We only need to watch the news to witness a chaotic world in crisis. The ensuing levels of stress and poor mental health are at an all-time high.
From a very early age, we're conditioned to conform to society's demands without question. We buy things we don't need just to make us happy.
And to take pills to make us feel better. To artificially enhance our image in order to fit in and be liked.
We chase after money and success, whatever that means, but it always leaves us wanting more.
The fact is, we live in a world of false realities and half-truths, and we don't know what to believe.
We're obsessed with trying to find solutions outside of ourselves, but this can never work.
Only by changing ourselves from the inside can we rediscover our authentic and true self.
If we want to change the world, we have to transform our inner state of mind first. All the great thinkers and sages of the past knew this truth.
Whatever our colour, creed, gender or preference, we have the capacity to adopt a new way of thinking, a new way of living, and a new way of being, to build a safer, healthier and happier world for ourselves and our children.
We can adopt a new way of living, which is both more efficient and more relaxed. This is the purpose of The Way, Finding Peace in Turbulent Times.
Lovely, thank you. So I'm going to go straight over to Vernon. I'm just making it into speaker view. Take it away, Vernon. Thank you.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for being here, and thank you, Jill, for inviting me. I'll just say a couple of things about the book and why we've done it. And you saw my co-author, Katie, who's a very, very spiritual person. And we worked together on the first book called The Stairway to Happiness, which explains the gradation of what is happiness. Happiness, a very, very strange word. It doesn't really mean anything until we start to explore it. And the gradations go from instant gratification right way through to the happiness of harmony. And the fourth stage is in fact the happiness of interrelationships, which is in fact collaboration. So if you got that book, it looks like this. That is really the starter of the journey to explore who we are, why we're here, what matters, and to start to understand why the world is in the state it's in. So the last stage of the Stairway to Happiness is the happiness of harmony, and that takes us straight into the next book, which is really the Finding Peace in Turbulent Times. And we start off by trying to explain, why do we have these turbulent times? Because it's inevitable. What is happening is absolutely inevitable. So yes, we wrote it before COVID, and we talk about the risk of a pandemic. We talk about the risk of warfare. There's nothing brilliant about that. It's absolutely obvious that until we change our way of thinking, we have postmodern technology with not even Bronze Age thinking. We are completely ego obsessed, and that ego obsession means that we are stuck in a victim mentality. And whilst we're stuck in that, we see ourselves as being separate human beings. And the separateness of a human beings means that I better be selfish. I better get the things for me because nobody else matters other than myself. So if we, and so the inevitability of that is that we start to fight. If you're different from me, then the more different you are, the more frightened I am of you. And ego is based on fear. Ego is fear-based. Ego is denial-based. So if I'm frightened of you, that's ego. If I'm fearful, that's ego. And I better do something about it. Ego always wants more. It's never satisfied. So if I get something, I'm going to want something else. If I'm frightened of you, I'm going to try and defend myself. And then obviously a fight will break out. I'll do things which are apparently for my own good and not for the good of anybody else. So in the way Finding Peace in Turbulent Times, we explore in depth, why is the world like this? Why is our thinking like this? Where has that come from? And what do we do to deal with it? So we go into Freud, we go into Jung. There's a lot of Jungian philosophy for shadow. We go into how to deal with those things. How do you deal with anxiety? How do you deal with suffering? How do you deal with grief? How do you deal with conflict when it occurs? Most of us have been taught to deal with it either by denial, or by running away from it, or by sedating it, or by just trying to ignore it, walking away from it. None of those work. And of course, the more we do that, the more we actually repress the feelings and make them worse. So what we've done in the way Finding Peace in Turbulent Time is to explain the system for getting out of that, for actually understanding who we really are. And I know, Jill, you said you're not the same person as you were before, which is Heraclitus. Heraclitus says, no man steps in the same river twice. It's not the same river and it's not the same man. But Parmenides said, actually, nothing ever changes. And they're both right. Because actually, there is nothing you can do to change yourself. You can only change your perception of your life's events, not who you are. However, we'll come back to that. So the question I'm going to want to put to you for your breakout are two questions. One is, who are you? And the second is, what's the end game? Who are you really? And to try and give you a little bit of help in there, and I think you might find it useful, that there are really four basic philosophies that have existed in the world and that have more or less determined how we think. So the first one is really the constructed, the created myth, or the created philosophy that says you have been created by a greater force, call it what you want, call it God, call it whatever, energy. And you are here under sufferance. You are really, if you take the religious side of it, you're really a sinner. And you need to try and emulate the godlike creature, or whatever you want to call it, that created you. It's a ceramic model. It's also called that. Alan Watts calls it the ceramic model. So you are here under sufferance. You are tasked with trying to be like God. And since he sent his son in the Christian religion, you are trying to be like his son. And by the way, if you're very good, you'll go to heaven. And if you're very bad, you'll go to hell. And, I'm at the top here as God, and then I've got my archbishops and bishops, and then I've got the divine right of kings. I've got my aristocrats, I've got my autocrats, and I will tell you how to behave, what to do. I will give you the commandments. You must follow those to the letter. And by the way, the church in which you'll come along is constructed in such a way that I'm lifted up, slightly higher up. I've got a wall behind me, so I can't be attacked. And you are supplicants in the chairs in front of me. That is exactly the same model as a court of law, where the judge sits up and the accused and everybody else is lower down. I'm in charge. This is the autocratic model. This is the model that has existed for most of the last 3,000 years. Somebody's in charge, somebody's telling you what to do, telling you what to think, telling you how to behave. And it's very prevalent today. If you look at what's happening in the autocratic systems, the totalitarian systems, it's exactly that model. Pushed to the extreme that you have to do exactly as I say, and not only that, you have to think exactly as I say. So who are you under that model? That's one. The second model is the scientific model. So the scientific model says, no, all that is nonsense. How can you possibly imagine somebody being able to control you? You are really a random piece of DNA. You're here completely by chance. Nobody knows how you arrived. Nobody knows where you're going to. But the fact is you're here as a separate piece of DNA for a period of time. And you better look after yourself during that time because nobody else is going to look after you. This is the selfish gene. This is the God delusion. You know, obviously, the idea of a God is completely illusionary. There can't possibly be one. You're scientific, and the law of the survival of the fittest is the law that actually predominates. Because whoever's strongest, whoever manages to have the best resources, be the cleverest, be able to survive, that is who you are, a random piece of DNA. The third model is the dramatic model. So the dramatic model says, no, all of that is nonsense. The world is actually a stage, and we're actors, as Shakespeare found, but he was actually reflecting a predominantly Hindu model that says we are all manifestations of Brahman. So Atman, which is the self, with a big S, is Brahman. And we are all manifestations of that. It's the 10,000 faces of God. And we're acting. The word personality comes from persona, which is Greek meaning a mask. We're always wearing a mask. So maybe when you said we're all different, it's because we're all wearing a different mask, depending on who we're talking to, where we are, what we're doing. And we get so lost in this basically ego-derived mask that we start to believe this story. I've on occasion, when somebody's gone really wild, I've said to them, I want to offer you my greatest congratulations. And they look at me as if, what on earth is he talking about? I say, you have been absolutely brilliant. What do you mean? It calms them down, by the way, very, very quickly if you say that. I said, well, you are acting this part, you're playing this part of being really angry and difficult. You are playing it so superbly. I actually think you believe it. Oh, it's a mask. Are you really that person? And if you can change your role, if you can change this mask all the time, who are you really? These are just masks. Who are you really? And the fourth model is the ecological model. Previously, I think probably called the mystical model. And today, quantum physics has demonstrated the validity of this model, which Newtonian physics couldn't. So Newtonian physics was very much linked to the scientific model, cause, effect, the billiard ball hits this, the billiard ball goes here, and I can predict everything. Quantum physics says I can predict nothing at all because yes, there's cause and effect, but actually I don't know what the cause is and I don't know what the effect is. And I often get them the wrong way around. And it's so complex that the ecological model says we are all actually connected, whether we like it or not. It is impossible for us to do anything without connections to everything else. So whilst the scientific model will say, well, your body is what defines you, the ecological model says, but my body cannot possibly exist without the rest of the universe. Well, how am I going to eat? How am I going to survive? How can I survive anyway without connections to other people? If I was dropped on a desert island, I could have all the wealth in the world, but if there wasn't anybody else there, I wouldn't survive very long. We are all, so the ecological model says we're all connected in a giant universe, the strength of which is unparalleled and unimaginable. Einstein recognized this completely, right? He used to get very irritated when people said, your scientific discoveries are all the result of your scientific genius. And he said, no, they're the result of my spirituality. So he started off to try and explain effectively quantum physics with words. And he realized that totally inadequate. Words are man-made, they're form, they are really totally inadequate to explain this. So the next stage is to go to mathematics, which is a much more extensive language, much more complex. And he went, and so all these complicated formulae that you see take you to the next stage. And then he realized, having discovered the relativity, everything is related to everything else, he realized he was only just scratching the surface. He said, my goodness. So he said the scientist's religious feeling takes the form of a rapturous amazement at the harmony of natural law, which reveals an intelligence of such superiority that compared to it, all the systematic acting of a human being is utterly irrelevant. This feeling is the driving force behind his work insofar as he succeeds in freeing himself from the shackles of selfish desire. It is without question that which possessed the religious sages of all time. He was describing the ecological model. He was describing the mystical model that all the sages of the past have talked about and were told, no, but you're talking nonsense. You can't prove anything. So these are the four essential models that have determined pretty well how life is lived. People don't necessarily think about consciously, but in reality, they're living in one or the other of those, and their actions are linked to that. Do we do what everybody tells us? Do we follow the crowd? Do we accept what's happening without question? First model. Or do we say, no, I'm on my own here. I can do whatever I want. I've made wealth. I can do what I want. Or am I just an actor? I'm just an actor. Or am I connected to everybody else? So that's really the starter for who are you? And the second part of it is, and what's the end game? What's it all for? So that's really my introduction. We have got, obviously we've done, Katie and I have done, we've got a workbook, we've got courses on this, we've got guided meditations, but which are very private. So we will share those. We're both hypnotherapists and we're both EQ assessment trained. So we use Zen Buddhism, we use hypnotherapy in the guided meditations, depending on what the need is. So it can go from anything to basic relaxation, to grief management, forgiveness, dealing with the past, and pain. My very close colleague, Dr. John Butler, he had his hernia operation without any anesthetic, just using the power of hypnotherapy, which works very well if you do it. So that's what we do, and I think probably that's my 20 minutes, I guess. I could go on about whatever aspects you want, because obviously there's a lot of depth in, we've done a lot of research over many years. I am actually a businessman, and I use this I'm on the board of a very big French IT company. I used to be the CEO of Reckitt and Coleman, and I use these techniques all the time in my work. So that's for the breakouts, and maybe you'd like to have a think about it. If you would like, at the end, when you come back, I have a 2-minute technique, which you might be interested in for relieving anxiety, relieving stress, and helping you to discover who you are, if you would like.